very good afternoon, everybody. We have a very cozy audience today in this beautiful chapel room. I hope you guys had a good lunch. Hi Micah. We are waiting for some additional friends and family, no family, just friends to join us. In the afternoon today, I have the great honor of introducing an additional panel on food security and nutrition, but this time from an FSP client's perspective. And I have a great honor of having Mr. Hans Ramm from Switzerland connected remotely. Hi, Hans. I hope you can hear us. I have a great honor of having Ian from Entrepreneur du Monde with me, Pranav, Sridhar from 60 Decibels. Myself, I'm a consultant. My name is Matteo Marinelli. I've been in the financial inclusion space for the last 21 years. I've been collaborating with my colleagues here, Serena and Arn at Amas, Norway, over the last 2 years on an Ethiopian project. Anyway, I was also running an FSP in Myanmar as CEO with good work that we were doing with farmers and smallholders. So let's have a good discussion today on, again, what we bring to you in terms of clients' initiatives, FSP stories, and interventions. I will set the tone right now. I will walk you through some slides just to put things into perspective. I think yesterday, for those of you that attended Mika's session here at the plenary, we had a bit of an overview at a macro level on the key topics around food security and nutrition, the major interventions. Yesterday afternoon, there were also a session on food security and nutrition from a client perspective. Today, we want to dive deeper into what things are working, what things are not working, what interventions are out there. And let's not forget that, again, we all eat every day, right? Some of us eat 2 times a day, 3 times. Some of us are doing interval fasting, keto diets, and all of that. But there is a big chunk of people in the world that struggle to have nutritious, balanced diets. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for coming. We have a cozy session in this cozy chapel. I feel like a priest. I'm not going to comment on those numbers. I want you to reflect in silence. So, quite shocking, yeah? And these numbers have gotten worse. As we heard yesterday, we kept hearing since 2 days ago, because of COVID, the wars, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, ongoing crisis, climate related phenomena, climate refugees. It's a massive problem. And I don't think we in the industry are talking enough about this. Is it sexy enough to talk about food security and nutrition compared to climate change and green finance? Are we as an industry riding those marketing waves, those big multilateral institutions, or are we really breaking down those problems into smaller problems and trying to fix them once and for all? Let's not forget that maybe, 15, 20 years back, whenever some people at United Nations with other folks decided about the Sustainable Development Goals, we said 2030, SDG number 2, zero hunger. Either we got those predictions wrong back in time, but those are moving targets, or we're not doing enough to fix the problem. May I ask you, Serena, what is the number that shocked you the most? Mikol? All of them. What can we do? What can FSPs do to fix this? Well, yesterday, Mika, a great friend, a great colleague, again, for those of you who don't know her, she has read amazing papers and publications about the topic, so please read, check her up. She walked us through some of the theory that we need to know. Quickly, the 4 dimensions of food security, I think everybody's clear on what those dimensions are and what they mean. Again, availability of food, but not just availability of food, of appropriate food. When I was a kid, I was told some kids go to sleep with being hungry, okay, or with a full belly. Having a full belly, it depends. If it's full of stuff that keeps you full but not balanced, nutritious diet, then you are not going to develop well. You know, how much we spend on our supermarket shopping, that we can. You know, a little pack of organic eggs in Switzerland, where I used to live, would cost a fortune. And we're willing to spend that because we think that that's how we want to feed ourselves. But what about people in the South or in emerging markets, in developed and low-income countries? Access. People can afford to buy and produce the kinds of food they want, they need. Utilization. It's about knowledge and ability to consume nutritious food. That's key. And of course, is this nutritious food available domestically, or are we flying bananas from Paraguay to Switzerland? And let's not even talk about the CO2 gas emissions of this global supply chain. Yesterday, Micah and some other colleagues, we heard today, yesterday, the day before, about this magic word here, which, I'll be honest with you, up until recently, I was not very familiar. Now that I'm diving into the topic, I become more aware that there are that when we talk about food security, we need to talk about this continuum journey of people from starvation to adequate quality and sustainable intake. In the middle, there are different layers with various different sort of intakes. What are those global causes of malnutrition and food insecurity? I think, again, I want to summarize and bring you guys back into sort of a summary, but a macro level perspective. Of course, we need to talk to governments. How many times we see government policies in emerging markets or subsidies to the agricultural sector? They have a major role. Trade, international trade, treaties, infrastructure, population growth. But at a micro level instead, as I said earlier, we are lucky because we can afford the food that we want, the supermarkets that we like. We can go to Amazon Fresh, we can go to the local supermarket, we can buy grocery from wherever, farm to table. We have restaurants in Europe, farm to table, 0 kilometers. But all those concepts in the global south, not so. And of course, food behaviors, look at this, are influenced by, of course, income level, education, cultural, and social. We are lucky, we are fortunate. A lot of people aren't. When we mix the macro level and the micro and the macro level, I think that we need to talk about the behaviors of all actors in the food system. And why? And I think, again, yesterday we heard that we talk about food systems because it's a circle of players and actors combined together working in this major industry. So farms, farmers, transport companies, processors, distributors, food companies, markets, vendors, supermarkets. It's a huge ecosystem. And we can always, there could be initiatives for each of those players. And on top of that, let's not forget that we are living into, well, difficult times when it comes to climate, right? I hope you are aware sorry to be quite pessimistic, but it's Friday, it's after lunch, I did not have my second coffee, and I'm not very optimistic, but we are on the verge of mass extinction. Yes? You are aware, I hope, that if we continue the way we are to power our lives, our economies, the way we've been doing, I think at some point in the future generations, the children of our children will not see the 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter, that in some countries we had. Food systems play a major role in tackling climate change. So I hope this would be a wake-up call. But I'm not worried about this room. I'm worried about the other people that are not attending this conference. So please spread, educate, challenge your governments, your FSPs, whoever has the power. Pranav, you're next. I want you to first introduce yourself, introduce your company, and walk us through the beautiful work that 60 Decibels does. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Matteo, for that introduction. I'm going to just stand so that it's a little bit easier for me to present a little bit about the index. So I'm Pranav. I lead client success at 60 Decibels. We are a global social impact measurement company. And what I really love most about our work is all of our measurement comes directly from the recipients, the customers, the clients of socially minded businesses, programs, and organizations around the world. And we work across many sectors. The ones that are most relevant for the conversation today are financial inclusion and specifically microfinance financial service providers, as well as those that work in the agriculture space to sort of improve both the sustainability of agricultural practices, but also ultimately improve the income levels, the quality of life, and the overall well-being of smallholder farmers around the world. Today, and maybe some of you have already seen this introduction, so apologies if it's repetitive, but what I'm really, really excited to sort of share and add a little bit more color to what Matteo has sort of just described is a more granular sort of data and analytic perspective. So Matteo sort of walked us through very helpfully the global challenges we are facing when it comes to lack of access to quality food and nutrition. What I'm excited to present via the Microfinance Index is just a bit of an insight into the lived experience of microfinance clients from over 40 countries around the world from a food perspective. So very specifically, what are the positive impacts that microfinance is having on clients' lives in terms of improving their access to the number and quality of meals that they can consume on the one hand, and on the other hand, what is the negative impact of microfinance on food security? So more specifically, is microfinance and the need for repayments to microfinance loans actually placing a burden on food security, and how we as a sort of collective can really think about supporting communities to mitigate those risks. So with that, I'll just quickly first introduce the index itself. We started this initiative a few years ago, but in 2022, 2023 alone, we listened to about 32,000 clients of over 114 microfinance institutions in over 30 countries around the world. This is an exercise where we actually listen to them in their own regional, local language to really hear from them about the impact that a microfinance loan has had on their lives. And today I'll be zeroing in a little bit specifically around food security, given that that's the key element that we're most interested in.
Give me a second.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have any questions right now, just raise your hand and we will catch you, okay? There is not a fixed time for Q&A. So if you want to say something, just raise your hand. We'll give you the microphone to speak. Thank you. Sorry, Pranav, go ahead.
Cool. So the first place I just wanted to sort of do a bit of a double click into, and actually even before I sort of do this very quickly, again, just to sort of zoom out a little bit, I want to emphasize that the Microfinance Index collects data across various different dimensions. So to what extent are sort of financial service providers reaching underserved customers? To what extent are they improving the business impact, so income and employment generation of borrowers who are accessing the loans? It also measures impact on resilience. So to what extent are communities able to rebound from a financial shock? And in addition to that, client protection. To what extent are they sort of experiencing fair sort of behavior from their agents who actually work as well as are they experiencing any sort of unexpected charges? Are they getting pressurized in any ways? Because ultimately, we want to make sure that clients have a positive experience with microfinance. And with all of that, as I mentioned, the one I'm going to focus a little bit on is food, but specifically the ways in which different aspects of the borrower's experience with the microfinance institution affects their access to food and their food security more broadly. So the first key insight that I wanted to sort of mention is around the is the idea of longevity. So again, I know there was a bit of an interesting conversation on day one about sort of who we're actually representing in the sample, but some of the limitations notwithstanding, the one main sort of insight that we took away is that by and large, when clients are, stay with financial service providers over longer periods of time, they experience deeper quality of life outcomes. So here, as you can see, I'll just quickly explain this chart, which says that the line in yellow, the bar in yellow, are those borrowers who've been with the financial service provider for over 2 years. And the one in sort of orange red, we're still always confused what color that is, but if you know, you can tell me. Anyone who's been with the financial service provider for less than 2 years is in red. And so what we see consistently across the board is for most outcomes at the household level, when a borrower is actually with the financial service provider for a longer period of time, they experience deeper impact on their access to or their ability to spend on more and higher quality meals. And of course, what you see here are averages, but we actually see a much wider spectrum where in certain instances, the impact is much, much deeper as a result of a longer time spent with the financial service provider. And another element that I want to emphasize is the impact of the way in which the loan is used, again, on access to higher quality and higher number of meals or greater spending on meals within the household. So, for instance, again, if you can look at these multiple dimensions, the two main sort of segmentation variables that we've applied here are whether they use the loan for consumption only or for income generating and business purposes. And again, it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's helpful to understand the depth of this, which is if you're actually providing loans for income generating activities, your ability to create deeper impact on food, i.e. their ability to spend more on higher quality food, is better, the 20 versus the 8%. I'll keep going in the interest of time because I do want to sort of highlight one of the last key elements in my presentation for now and then come back to the discussion, which is the negative potential risks of microfinance. So on the leftmost screen, I first wanted to just sort of give you an overview of what we saw across the 30,000 borrowers, which is that we're trying to understand whether they needed to cut back on food consumption to make repayments, right? So about 20% of respondents, so about 1 in 5, had to make some kind of cutback on food consumption to actually make their repayments. And within that, we have those who do it regularly, which is the smallest percentage and the most concerning percentage, which across the sample is less than 5%. But that is 5% of a very, very large microfinance market who are very vulnerable to having to make cutbacks to make repayments. And that's something that we just first want financial service providers to be cognizant of and be aware of so that they can then manage that risk and support those communities appropriately and prevent them, as Matteo showed earlier on, from going into the food insecure category over time. And then the one other thing I want to mention was this very strong correlation. So once more, we see that those who find that repayments are burdensome are also those who are much more likely to actually cut back on food consumption. So 48% of respondents who reported that they find payments burdensome are actually or have reduced food consumption to make those repayments. So again, the relationship between stress, between burdensome repayments and food security is very high. And so I guess the main sort of takeaway, if I want to leave you with one, is if FSPs are sort of tracking and collecting this kind of data, they begin to understand who is more or less likely to be food insecure, and hopefully that helps them serve them and sort of manage their challenges better over time. So that's it from me for now, but would take questions now or later and hand it back to Matteo.
You have a question from me right away. Go back to the previous slide. When you got these data points, right, I want to ask you, what was the reaction of the FSP senior management when you showed this data? Were they aware that they had those issues at hand? Were they surprised? They were already working on hypothetical solutions, or they were shocked by the findings? Thank you, Pranav.
For sure. So the quick answer is it's a variety of different ones. So in several locations, so particularly so in a lot of the FSPs we worked with in Africa, they were the ones who had both deeper impact on the positive side. So they were also the ones where clients were more likely to say, access to the microfinance loan has improved incomes, which has allowed us to access meals better. But on the flip side, there were also many where they were more likely to say they had to cut back on food consumption, especially if they had not been able to use the loan for income generating purposes, but primarily for consumption. So the short answer, Matteo, is that we've seen places where they had a hypothesis or a hunch, and the data we collected helped them be more specific about the proportion of their client base that had that, and therefore work on that more sort of targetedly, and also make a case to their investors or TA providers to focus on that particular problem versus other problems, because in certain instances it was sort of not being able to spend on education or healthcare, and that's where they were able to target their sort of TA funding or other forms of resources. I hope that helps a little bit.
Can we give a round of applause to Pranav, please? Thank you. Do we have any FSPs, managers, CEOs, founders in this room? Could you please raise your hand? One. Only one FSP? So, investors? Donors? Okay. The others, it's an unknown bunch of people. Good. Great, I like that. Thanks. Hans has a huge experience. He's been around, is a friend of mine. He's based out of Switzerland. He couldn't make it, but he's remotely calling us. I'm asking the technical team behind to let Hans pop up, please. He will walk us experience, his knowledge, and the floor is yours, Hans. If you could please introduce yourself. If you could please introduce yourself, if you could please introduce the beautiful work you have done and walk us through the slides, we are all ears. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and also I appreciate also being on the panel and also had the honor to assist the European Microfinance Platform in pre-screening the 40 applicants for the Food Security Nutrition Prize. I'm now a consultant, SPI social auditor. I work as financial inclusion practitioner with many types of financial service providers, from agriculture to micro, down to village banks in institution transformation, downscaling, upscaling, social performance management, etc., in around 20 countries. But I also wore the donor hat until a year ago, addressing food system transformation as a senior policy advisor on agriculture investments and financial inclusion. So I also was very impressed, as Matteo said, about this food security and nutrition panel just yesterday, and they were more lucky, it was just before the lunchtime. And really what I first wanted to show in my first slide is that just really to stress that we can only tackle this huge multi-dimensional issues through a multi-stakeholder approach. So it is not really, I mean, the financial inclusion industry can contribute a lot, but not alone. And I just, as an overview, I just wanted to shortly pinpoint 6 main approaches to strengthen food security and healthy nutrition. The first two are the focus on our discussion here with the financial service providers and the impact investors. And this is a blended finance approach for inclusion inclusive financial service providers, where the public sector would help through blended finance instruments. Doesn't have to be just a traditional technical assistance. There could be many different guarantee schemes and impact incentive bonuses and etc. That to strengthen them in their mission to offer low-income people, and I really want to highlight particular women as family caretakers, financial services to save, invest, smoothen consumption, mitigating shocks with complementary support like financial literacy training, but also agri-extension work, market information, etc. And that would help the clients or the members in the case of cooperatives to strengthen their ability to afford and access or growth, if we are talking about smallholder farmers, sufficient healthy food. And the other approach is basically what we call this SME lending, the missing middle. Traditionally in the microfinance discussion is to blended finance for inclusive agricultural and food, small and medium and sized enterprises who are transacting particularly with smallholder farmers and thereby helping to strengthen the market position of smallholder farmers and supporting smallholder farmers to enhance productivity, adopt agroecological practices, etc. Some of this you have heard in the session on the smallholder safety net upscaling program yesterday in the session from ADA just after lunch. So how does it really work well, those two approaches? And this is the focus of this conference due to the participants of this conference, is reaching women. And that has been clearly said in several of the previous food security and nutrition panels, through their aggregators being market players, because it's about helping people, particularly women and households, to improve the access to healthy food at affordable prices. So that is important, that we can work through so-called aggregators, those who already have business transactions with those low-income households, in particular women. So this gender-sensitive financial and non-financial services, and that includes also then gender-balanced staff and management of those aggregators, are really key in order to see results. And that has been very clearly said, actually by Mika yesterday, no, by the lady from the World Food Program, that women use money more responsibly for family welfare and business, and that is really absolutely a precondition for successful or positive outcomes. The second one is also that those aggregators, and there can be financial intermediaries, but also agricultural SMEs along the food value chains and farmers organizations, that they really offer so-called win-win business transactions with their client due to their strong environmental, social, and governance practices. And also, it is important that selecting those aggregators that have a strong market positioning in order to reach scale and also even demonstration effects. So important is, and this is then also more an address to the funders, that those blended finance instruments, there should be smart subsidies that really facilitate systemic market changes and follow a level playing field approach. That unfortunately is not often the case, as donors throw too much money in the market, crowding out local suppliers and service providers. But I will not mention any examples now. The third approach, next slide, please.
We have the next slide, so go ahead, Hans.
Yeah. It's basically what I would call the classical donor projects for food and nutrition, and they are often rather very much top-down planning and top-down implementation, and as a consequence, often with little sustainability. They're too much supply-driven and not really via the market mechanism, and this is where actually money could be much better spent on the first two approaches I just mentioned. The fourth one is food aid, and we heard yesterday in the panel discussion from the World Food Program. I think the important thing is always to find the right nexus between humanitarian aid and market mechanisms, like, for instance, disaster insurance. Could just mention, for instance, the African risk capacity, where through a private sector and insurance approach, then money could be then mobilized in order to fund post-disaster relief and social protection schemes. The fifth approach is, and this I think is also very important, because we are really talking about stakeholder partnerships and everything what is with the market mechanism. I mean, also depends very much on regulation. So it is not only actually the regulation for regulation and fiscal measures in regard to food consumption, but it's also in regard to agriculture and also to financial inclusion. But starting with the food consumption, it's all about to internalize the environmental and health costs of food production and also consumption by the regulator. And this is then really would also then help as a demand-driven approach, because the demand determines the supply. So we have too many supply-driven project approaches, but it is important that, for instance, the value-added taxes on food products needs to compensate for environmental and health costs of particular food items, to encourage consumers to switch towards more healthy food items. What is very interesting in that, I just wanted to mention so-called true cost food study, which had been recently done in Switzerland with some food items, and the conclusion is, I just telling the let's say the worst type of food and the best type of food, that in case of a kilo of beef, the price should be actually more than double as high as it is right now, in order really to compensate for the negative societal and health related cost. And on the other side are apples, and apples should actually not cost a kilo of average 3.7 francs in Switzerland, but it should actually be a so-called negative then value-added tax. It should be even subsidized by 2.990. That really would actually be the logical approach. We have an environment long time with CO2 emission gas, then the markets and so on. So it is a bit more complicated to calculate this, but this is also what we need actually for food products. And the very positive and example is just that the government of Colombia just started and 10% tax on sugary beverages and ultra-processed foods on the 1st of November to fight obesity, which stands at 56.4% of the total population. And
Hans, just one couple of more minutes, please. Sorry.
Yeah. And okay, so the sixth approach is basically also food and nutrition specific curricula to implement as part of primary and secondary education, really to promote a more healthy diet, awareness building, and also how to do it with school gardening. Now, my next and last slide is about the four main types of inclusive partner organizations for strengthening food security and nutrition. And we had already some panel representatives being the impact investors, notably those with a mission to strengthen food security and nutrition and investing into smallholder agriculture finance. Because smallholder agriculture are 70% of global poor and they're producing 80% of the food. So they do, as mentioned previously, they invest in rural financial intermediaries, agri-SMEs, and farmer organizations. So important is that they also will really have a risk approach and a food security and ultimately also then a nutrition approach in regard to risk for their investments. And for food production, agriculture production is already known that the global leader Rabobank already developed a risk-based investment pricing for specific type of agriculture production.
Hans, if that's okay with you, let's go through the examples, for example, of agtech and fintech companies later on when we have a bit of a Q&A session. I don't want to cut you short, but in the interest of time, I'd like to move on to Ian and then go back to you on, because I'd like you to talk us about Apollo and crowd farming, if that's okay. Thank you. Moving on, Ian, EDM. By the way, let's give him an applause, and let's give an applause to Hans, because yesterday EDM Burkina Faso FSP has won the award. So we're all happy for you guys.
Thank you very much. So yeah, last night, one of our programs that we helped incubate, SEP in 2014, ICRI won the Microfinance Award. So yeah, thank you very much. So it's okay, I didn't go out last night and drink too much, so hopefully we can get through today. So yeah, I work at Entrepreneur de Monde. I've been there for 7 years. I'm the Social Performance and Environment Technical Advisor for Social Entrepreneur de Monde. And I'm originally from the UK, but Entrepreneur de Monde is based in Lyon in France. So our overall kind of vision overall is to end poverty through entrepreneurship. We want our partners, our individuals that we support, to help themselves to work their way out of poverty through generally entrepreneurship. So the mission of Entrepreneur de Monde, we support vulnerable people, very vulnerable people in very precarious situations in rural and urban settings towards empowerment, resilience, and improved living standards through entrepreneurship. And we do this through incubating a network of social enterprises. So we work with social enterprises across several different spaces. So we're not just social microfinance. We incubate social microfinance institutions, of course, access to energy organizations, organizations that help individuals access small business support and development, and also agro entrepreneurship. So you can see in the graphic there that as of today, we have 181,000 direct beneficiaries that we work with within our programs. And our services also help the families that are associated with those individuals as well. So we can scale that up to saying that we touch 900,000 individuals across our programs with these 23 social enterprises that we've designed and set up and support. So 13 of these 23 are pure social microfinance institutions. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the social microfinance model that we have at Entrepreneur de Monde, because it's very closely related to solving aspects of food security, because we're microfinance plus, we're not just the loans and finance, we do loads of extra stuff around that to try to support our partners across a range of issues, of which food security is one of them, and it is a growing issue as well. So yeah, we've got 46 staff members in France, 814 staff members across our network of institutions. So, you know, painting the picture, the figures that Matteo said before were awful to read. And we do our own research, obviously, into this. So we went to our partners in Haiti in 2021, and we did a survey with them on food security. And 18% of the partners that we spoke to, we call them partners, so if I use the word partners, I mean clients. 18% of our clients that we spoke to exhibited moderate food security, which means they'd skipped or missed meals during the last year, but 66% severe, which means they're reducing portion sizes, skipping meals, cutting them out in the last month in which we surveyed them. So this is a growing problem, particularly driven obviously by inflation and the war in Ukraine, COVID. This is just becoming more and more of an issue. So in Vietnam, there's been an increase in the moderately and severely food insecure people. And so overall, I would say that in terms of our model, you know, the approaches to solving food security, they differ between rural and urban settings. And we operate in both urban and rural settings. So I think a lot of this conference has been about rural approaches, and I want to touch a little bit about urban approaches today to food security to make things a little bit different. But it's just to say, yeah, approaches are different, and you know, we don't see microfinance alone to be able to solve this deep problem. So what does our model look like in urban areas? So we talked about the dimensions of food security before, and the main issue is obviously lack of access to food due to low household incomes, low savings. The fluctuations of savings within the household means that one week, okay, you've got food on the table, next week an emergency happens, you don't. So there's an issue with stability and the utilization of food as well. So this is a broad term that includes, you know, education around nutrition, clean cooking equipment as well to cook nutritious meals is an aspect that we work with. Also the safe storage of food, about refrigerator ownership. People tend to not have fridges. And also issues around hygiene as well, particularly in urban areas. So our solution is a holistic social microfinance model. Obviously, income generating activity loans to help our partners, small amounts, 200 euros is the average. Our partners gather themselves in groups. So it's what Claire was talking about yesterday at ICRI. It's an individual liability, so each person within the group is liable for their loan, but they formulate into a group and they meet every 2 weeks or in rural areas every month to repay their loans to a group leader, and also they receive training during those group meetings every 2 weeks, every month on a topic. So below you can see the non-financial services. We have financial training, which is encouraging, you know, people, we have a savings product, so you have to save a minimum amount every 2 weeks. It's very small, but it's something. But we also train them on why saving is important. You know, why are you doing this? What can happen if you don't save? And so teaching them about savings habits is important. Budget training as well, how to manage a household budget. So 1 week, you know, there can be something that comes up, and how do you manage your budget between clothes and transport and food? So you can efficiently allocate the resources within your household. So there's that kind of training. There's business training as well to support their income generating activities through better marketing and things like that. Training we do in social and health topics around hygiene, how to, you know, particularly around COVID, we still managed to put up posters and contact our partners around this. But also the nutrition training we do is about the importance of eating a balanced and a healthy diet. Yeah.
Quick question, Ian. These non-financial trainings are coming off the pocket of the FSP, or you guys are subsidizing from the head office, or this is budget taken from the income statement of the MFI?
No. So this is all free on top of the loan.
Paid by the MFI?
Paid by the MFI, yeah. So our business model, because we see these trainings not There are financial benefits to the FSP to provide these trainings. Okay, so over-indebtedness creates PAR, and nobody wants, as an FSP, all these issues with growing loans. So by doing these kind of things and increasing people's health, increasing people's nutrition, understanding about why saving is important, over-indebtedness, all these things creates, first of all, a borrower that trusts you and likes the organization, so they're more likely to be loyal, to come back for more loans. Secondly, it helps to manage your PAR rates as well, to keep that portfolio at risk level, at a manageable level. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I'm just nodding in agreement because this is the sort of business case information that I'm really interested in hearing from all of you. Yeah. And by that I mean, what's the impetus for the microfinance institution to offer this? And I kind of challenge you to talk more about that. And I'm curious, to put you on the spot, to know how many of the MFIs in your network are operationally self-sufficient.
Yeah. So at the moment, we have 13 in our network. So our model is, once they become self-sufficient, they leave our network, if you like, and become independent institutions within themselves. So we already have 5 institutions, not in the 13, that are already self-sufficient, that have left. So within the 13, most of so HEM, one organization in a rural area, is self-sufficient, but most of the others are getting towards that level because we provide support to get them to that point. But our model has shown that we can get to that point with programs that have matured. So then, so ICRI, for example, at the moment is getting that, and it was actually very close. And then COVID hit, and the issues in Burkina Faso and created a lot of challenges. So we're continuing to offer that technical support to get them up to that stage. But we firmly believe that this is a sustainable business model in the long term. So we also have a network of social workers that support partners. And these social workers will attend group meetings, and at the end of the meeting, if our partners have personal problems, they can speak to them. So a lot of insights on our partners' nutritional habits and the fact that they're skipping meals comes from these social workers. Yeah.
Are those conversations easy about, I guess if someone would come to me and say in front of a group, are you starving?
Yeah.
I would lie.
Exactly. So so in a group, there's potentially shame around these issues. And so, even though we're in a group, getting that information is not necessarily going to happen. So these social workers, it's like going to see, a counselor, effectively. And so you're in a safe space with that person. It's one-to-one. And it's in those conversations where things come out, and we have a referral network as well. So, if somebody has been suffering from massive food insecurity, we link up with NGOs in Ouagadougou, in Burkina Faso, that do food banks or support in that area to help them and refer them onto that. So, ICRI, for example, does that, and it's a general, having this network of social workers. So there's one social worker per branch at the moment, generally speaking. In some of our smaller programs, we just have a couple, and it's something that we try to build up, or something that's a sustainable number. So yeah, that's another area where we get insights, and also we can move people on to other organizations that can help them. Yeah, sure. So this is just a very quick video. It's in the local language, but this is one of our trainings in nutrition delivered in the group setting.
They go in that 2 find something all in one. So when you eat more than what you belly, they say, your body they be good, and they call.
So this is with Munafa in Sierra Leone, in Freetown. And the trainer is a field officer, he's a loan officer, and he's trained up by the social worker on the topic. And the overall objective of the training is to ensure that the partners at the end of it know how to cook a nutritious meal and what those elements would include. So that's in the urban area. In the rural areas, I don't want to go too much into it like I did with the urban, because we've talked a lot about this, but we do have support to partners, adapted loans to the needs of the crop cycles, bullet loans, for example, adapted to farmers. We have a network of agricultural technical support providers as well in our rural programs that provide tips and suggestions on yields and technical issues to do with their farm to help them improve their crop yields. And there's this sub-project that we have in HM in Vietnam, and HM actually was a semi-finalist in the Microfinance Awards. It didn't quite get to the final, so we had a semi-finalist and finalist this year, and a winner rather. So it's been a good year for Entrepreneur Monde in that sense. But we have a rice sub-project in Vietnam, and it's a smaller group of 100 people, and it's over a longer period of time. So it's like not just one session, but it's a series of sessions to talk them through composting, fertilizing, pH levels and yields and things like that. So that was a much deeper program that got some grant funding from Vietnam to deliver that. So yeah, in the rural areas, we're doing a lot as well. We don't, and all the other issues that I talked about before, social workers, training on nutrition, we do it in the rural areas as well. The only difference is training is a bit less frequent because of the travel times to get there. So often in urban areas, it's every 2 weeks, and in rural areas, trainings might happen once a month. Some other interventions, improved cooking equipment loans in Fansoto in Senegal to help people reduce the amount of charcoal that they're having to buy, which fuel is a big driver, cost of fuel in the household budget, so it's expensive. So you reduce the cost of fuel that they're using, and that saves the money, which they can help put them towards.
Plus, I guess they do not inhale all those dangerous smokes in their lungs with those.
Yeah. There's the carbon emission side of it. There's the particles that they, into the home.
How much does something like that cost?
So the
roughly
stove is around €50, I think around that level.
And you guys provide loans for that?
Yeah, loans for that. Yeah, so basically the loans are over a 6-month period, and we want them to be able to afford these loans and not just throw additional loans alongside their business loans. So what we did is we calculated the savings that they would make from purchasing this in terms of charcoal, the amount of charcoal that they would buy. So that's a household savings line, and then matched the cost of credit to that. So we feel that they can still take these loans on without over-indebting them. There's a health insurance scheme in ICRI that won the award last night in Burkina Faso, where partners, they take health insurance, pay a small monthly fee. It's been very, very popular. And with that, up to 4 dependents within their household get up to 60% of their medical bills covered. And they also have social workers that are trained up in issues to do with medical issues, so that they're able to speak to them. They have like a direct line to somebody to support them if they have an ailment. And this is something that we created with an organization called AITA within Burkina Faso. So it's unique for ICRI's partners. And I think that was something that the panel found particularly interesting, because basically health issues can cause, a lot of, it costs a lot of money to solve that, and then food can go by the wayside. I don't know how we're doing for time, Matteo. Bad, okay.
Do you have more slides?
A couple, but it's a slightly different topic. Okay, indicators. We do track some indicators to understand this issue. Income, expenditure, savings, fridge ownership on the left. That's more in the urban setting. On the right, in the rural setting, hectares. Do they own the farm that they have or not? What's the size of it? How much farm equipment do they have? And in terms of positive results that we can see, so this is an organization called Munafa, the one that did the training, and we can see that on the left, the number of meals per day after 5 loan cycles has increased. A small amount, but the context in Sierra Leone is, in terms of inflation and everything, is horrific. So a small increase in that context, we don't know what would have happened if we weren't there. That would have made quite a big decrease, I would imagine. So, that's a small one. But on the right, we can see the number of food groups consumed, which is very much tied to our nutrition training. About a balanced diet has gone up a lot. And lastly, we have some indicators for our program in Sontoti Twin in Myanmar. So we basically have some metrics. So a score of 10 is the highest you can get in the area. A score of 0 is the lowest. So we ask questions like roof material, and if it's the highest roof material, they get a 10. If it's the lowest, they get a 0. So it's a way of us to easily track what's going on across these domains. And things have been really positive for partners between loan cycles 1 and 7. But nutrition has flatlined a little bit Because in Myanmar, with all of the situations at the moment, we've been able to deliver a lot of our trainings because of the security issue. And also we found that in the urban setting, our customers tend to, as their incomes have risen, eat actually a little bit less fruit and vegetables and more fatty diets. And so in the urban context, that tends to be the trend. And if you don't do the nutrition training alongside that, which we haven't been able to do, we can have this issue where some of our indicators are going up really nicely, but in terms of nutrition, we're not actually getting anywhere in that area. So thank you very much for your
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. A round of applause, please. Great initiatives, great stories. Is there anybody from the audience and the public that wants to ask something or disagrees with something or wants to bring his or her perspective? If not, please feel free to jump in. We started a few minutes late, so if you are hungry for coffee, you're free to go. If you're interested to stay a few more minutes, you're free to stay, okay? We're not gonna force anybody until they take me out with force, I'll stay here. Pranav, couple of quick questions for you, 120 seconds, and then we go to Hans, and then we go to Ian, but again, feel free to jump in. How does the impact on microfinance on food security vary by region? And is there a threshold of cutting back on food consumption that we think is acceptable? 120 seconds max.
Thanks for those questions, Matteo. I think in terms of how it varies by region, we see, as I mentioned very briefly in my presentation, deeper positive impact on, can you hear me on this? Yeah. Deeper positive impact on quality and number of food meals that, that borrowers spend on, particularly in Africa. So for instance, a really good example of an MFI, and we try to celebrate the ones that do really, really well, is Microloan Zambia. They were one of the top performers on our microfinance index. They operate in Zambia. And there, about 6 in 10 borrowers reported very much improved or very much increased spending on sort of the number and quality of meals as a result of access to their sort of microfinance loan. So demonstrating that it's probably one of the single biggest areas of household improvement as a result of access to the loan. In Asia and Latin America, we see sort of good performance, but slightly lower spread. So for instance, the top performers have about 4 in 10 of their customers reporting that they're really very much increasing spending on food and nutrition. At this moment, our data doesn't really have sort of data on the nutritional diversity of spend yet. We're not capturing that level of depth, but maybe in a future instance. That's one. And then on your second question, the answer is, it's hard to say, really, which is to say that, when we try to understand cutbacks on food consumption for making repayments, what's, I guess, encouraging at this stage is that a very small proportion, so across the whole sample, less than 2% of borrowers report that they cut back on consumption regularly, which we are both encouraged by, but at a large scale, that's still a high proportion of people. And what's possibly concerning is that on average, about 8 to 10% of borrowers report that they sometimes cut back on consumption to make repayments. And that is, again, that slightly insecure adjacent segment, which could be very insecure if that continues.
Are we FSPs comfortable making those repayments at the expense of food intake on the borrowers? Sir, please. Wrap.
Cynical question.
I love cynical questions.
I mean, I spent half my life in dealing with over-indebtedness.
Right.
And I look at Cambodia, and
Yeah.
I think 20 years later that we're not making progress. The stuff that you do dealing with is really important. But do you guys see any avenue for getting this integrated in the criteria or in the monitoring mechanism? Because in the simple thing of over-indebtedness, we're making so little progress. Because the points that you're pointing out is exactly what we've been pushing, is to say, if you've got the over-indebtedness, you're going to hit negatively on the household welfare level. But if we make this little progress on the simple metrics, are you seeing a way that of how, the other way around, how do you get this food security issues as part of the criteria? Is this a regulation issue? Is it an investor issue?
Sir, and then
Hi, my name is Carlos. I'm from Guatemala. The other finalist yesterday at the award, congratulations. Beautiful job that you do in Burkina Faso. One of the things that got our attention many years ago at the foundation, it is precisely what it is the measure that we should use in terms of the impact that what are we doing. And let me tell you that in-depthness, risk, KPIs, all those hard numbers are not the most important ones to measure. What we are measuring in the foundation, it is the development of the customers in terms of productivity, income, food, quality of life. And I can assure you that if you are, centering and focusing the efforts towards those KPIs, the other ones are going to improve much, much better. The problem it is when you focus on the, let's say, financial hard KPIs of the business, then you are going to lose two things. That in front of you is a person who is in need, in a very vulnerable state, in that climate change, something that happened, and those KPIs can be, affected by all those things that are natural in a vulnerable person. And the second one, it is that you are going to put a lot of pressure in the loan officer to try to, to achieve those KPIs, forgetting that he is serving to another person. So our recommendation for DDD is, where are you going to put your efforts, your focus, and the rest is going to come along. Thank you.
Thank you for your reflection. Next comment here.
Yes, hi, I'm from Grameen Credit Agricole Foundation. My name is Hanadi. I have a question on the evidence side. So when you say people will pay and they will cut meal to pay the loan, do we have evidence on that? Because we can argue it both ways. Some people would rather not pay forever rather than having their kids starve. Like they would do anything. They will go borrow from somebody else. They will do anything not to cut meal to their kids. So what kind of evidence, how do we measure that? Because I think it's very, very complex.
Pranav?
Yeah, I can take it first. Thank you so much for that sort of reflection. I think the first thing I'll say is very quickly respond to sort of how we collect this data, right? Which is that here we ask very specifically to them whether they have had to cut back in any instances to actually make repayments. So it's not a hypothetical. We're asking individual clients of microfinance sort of institutions and financial service providers if they've had to do it in order to make their repayments is the first. And the second thing is that, again, because we actually have data from the financial service providers about repayment behavior, we can actually also begin to understand what types of clients these are, right? So if these are clients who are systematically making their repayments, and at the same time also in certain phases mentioning that they are having to make cutbacks, then we have a slightly higher reason to believe that these are genuinely legitimate clients with legitimate concerns, and therefore try to do something more holistically to manage their food insecurity risks. So that's kind of how we approach it, with multiple data sources, both on repayment behavior as well as the data the FSP has, and then the client's own feedback as well.
I think just to jump in on from our side, so I agree. I think he's left the gentleman at the back's comment around our outcome indicators around what we track that I showed you in the presentation. Preventing over-indebtedness for us is we've got to make sure that we have a very strong operational policies around how we actually deal with over-indebtedness within the program. So a lot of what we do is, we do these social audits every 3 years with Cerise that lists out exactly what FSP should be doing in terms of good practices with over-indebtedness, because the last thing we want is for a partner to be skipping meals to pay us our loans back. It's massively detrimental to our social mission. It completely goes against everything that we're trying to do. So we have a very clear guidelines and training guidelines for our field officers about what methods you should do in terms of collecting repayments based on different scenarios. And our social workers and having this deeper understanding of our partners allows us to tailor an approach for them to, okay, give them a few more weeks, be very flexible in terms of those repayment patterns, and understand that if there is a crisis or an emergency coming up, then food isn't something that we would want to be impacting on. So, on our side, I think the key to address this for financial service providers to prevent what's happening in this data is to follow the Cerise SPI 5 methodology on what is good social performance practices for collecting repayments. And if you follow them, it should not be the case at all that partners are repaying your money because they're not buying food. It's maybe a problem with the loan application form process and not really understanding who your clients are and not giving them time to address any emergencies that might come up.
Hans, last question for you, 60 seconds, please. Do you have any good example of an FSP in your network, under your knowledge, that has been doing good work in strengthening food security and more balanced nutrition? Hans, please, if you could share your knowledge with us, that would be awesome. And if you could, someone put up Hans' face, that would be lovely.
Well, we just have to go back 11 years here when Companion, at that time Companion MFI in Kyrgyzstan received the runner-up Food Security Award. They got it actually at that time was a very innovative approach in order to started with Apple project to increase household income from the sales of their produce to promote biodiversity for long-term nutritional benefits and for sustainable land management. So they created several products like eco-garden, alpine greenhouses to improve production of vegetables in harsh growing conditions. The very nice thing to see that now they're one of the biggest banks in Kyrgyzstan that didn't lost their mission. And what I just got to know from their website that nowadays they're still supporting those Apple festivals, and they're the only bank with a training and support department of 15 qualified agronomy and livestock specialists. I think that is quite a great example. And for everyone who knows Kyrgyzstan with this quite continental climate condition can understand the challenge of having vegetables and nutritious food all around the sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Last question for Ian. What future interventions are you guys working on or thinking of developing at EDM? Thanks.
Thanks. Good question. So yeah, we're always trying to look for new and better, slightly more efficient, maybe solutions to operating our services. So one thing that we do is obviously the group methodology that we have is something that we feel works really well. So we've just done our strategic planning, and every new intervention that we pilot, we're going to integrate this group methodology. So that includes our new project that we're starting in Côte d'Ivoire, where we are supporting individuals with productive equipment loans. So it's quite specific with regards to refrigerators, improved cook stoves, rice mills, and solar water pumps as well is one area that we're looking to move into. So providing those productive equipment loans in rural Côte d'Ivoire and access to energy loans and agricultural technical support under one social enterprise structure is our next kind of project.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I wish you a beautiful afternoon. Just one word. Don't forget, we have ongoing microfinance crisis in 2 countries that have not been mentioned a lot over the last few days. One is Lebanon, and the other one is Myanmar. So let's keep shedding light on those ongoing crises, and let's make sure the industry comes together. Thank you very much. See you next year. Bye-bye.